Hello everyone. As this is the last week of our Learning from Home program, I'm hoping that there are a number of young men and families who are really looking forward to your sons and boys returning back to school. And young men, I can say to you that we as a staff are universally pleased that we will have students back returning to us next week, and we'll have the whole college with us. So can I first of all say to parents, can I thank you so much for your patience, for your trust and for your confidence in the college over the last 5 weeks when your sons have been at home using our Learning from Home platform. I'd also like to once again extend my thanks and my absolute admiration and affirmation of the work that our teaching staff have done and support staff over this time. It has been a significant amount of change in a short period of time, and their work to allow it to happen has been simply outstanding. So what we're looking forward to now in the transition period into moving back into school and face-to-face teaching is following a framework that we as St Patrick's leadership team have come up with, and that is the notion of reconnecting back into our community, reimagining what schooling can be now, and resetting our practices in teaching and learning so that we learn from this and actually improve our practices so that our students have the opportunity to have a different styles of learning into the future as well as obviously keeping what is good about past practices as well. So what our young men will find in their return back is the first week back, there will be a series of different activities done during tutor group. And those activities will be a starting of reconnecting, and they will also have sections in them where we'll be able to gather information that we call reimagining, and that is information where they can tell us what worked well for them in their learning. And then the resetting part comes later when we combine that information with the information we've collected from staff and from our Year 11 and 12 students over the period of time. And then that will be resetting for us to look at the practices changes that we'll put into place starting in the next semester. Our staff will do a lot of this work in series of workshops spread over the last staff week of the last week of this term, which will be our staff week, where we will be setting ourselves goals and action plans in each department and house, setting out what changes we would like to make so that we see a change in practice where we've pick up the best of traditions of the past and other information and pedagogical practices that will lead us forward into the coming years at St Patrick's. So by semester 2, we'll start putting some of those things into action. I've had a lot of questions of late about what's going on with co-curricular at the college when the boys return. So if I could break this into two sections, and the first is the cultural section. As most of the activities in music and choir, theatre, sports, art workshops, etc., and drama clubs are done indoors, and we currently have quite a clear acknowledgement from the government that it's best that these activities don't go ahead. Any ensemble practice, band practice, choir practices, they will all be left, and instrumental practice will be left until term 2. Those instrumental practices that are required for AMEB or Trinity College exams, they will continue, and our cultural department will make contact with the relevant students and parents with regard to that. Co-curricular sport, at this point in time, school sport is still connected to community sport outlines for after school. I understand the Queensland Government is looking at school sport in more detail in the coming weeks, but at this point in time, we are at stage 1, which is gatherings of 10, including a coach, no contact, and also no use of equipment or skill training, basically fitness and boot camp style training. And that will start with invitations in some of our sports over the coming days. In terms of the AIC sport for term 3, I would like to think that by the middle of next week or later of next week, there will be a clear communication to families what the intentions of the AIC is in terms of the sporting calendar and draws, so that you'll have some idea of what will happen over the course of term 3, assuming that stages 1 and 2 go well with the Queensland Government and we're able to expand on what we're doing into stage 3 by the start of next term. A couple of other little things I'd like to remind parents about, please, and that is an important part of the government's actions in trying to stop transmission is to try to stop or limit large gatherings. So in the mornings when your son gets dropped off to school, could I please ask that they just get dropped off from their car? We would ask that parents don't come into school unless there is a meeting or it has been organised or it is necessary. And likewise, after school, if you could please collect your son without gathering around any of the exits or entrances and waiting there for them, but direct them to your car. And just remind you, we had a police officer hanging around here this afternoon. There were some people that were spoken to about parking in the bus zones and also across driveways. So could I just ask people if you could remember that, that would be most helpful as well, please. Finally, we would love your support, and I'm sure you'll give it to us in talking to your sons about when they return to school, continue the hygiene. We have a number of different hand sanitised machines around that they haven't been around before, in and around the classrooms, obviously around our canteen and tuck shop and toilets. Our canteen will have marks on the floor where students will line in social distancing, lining up to go into the canteen. There will be a limit of the numbers inside, but we have no doubts that we'll be able to go through without any issues in timing during a lunch and a recess break. But we just ask the boys to remind themselves and others around them that these are things that we have to do. And so if they could follow those procedures, that would be fantastic. The other thing that I would ask you to remind your sons about is the social distancing. I guess our saying here at school when they gather around in groups at lunchtimes is step back rather than step forward. So they should be used to that by now, but obviously in the excitement of seeing one another again, sometimes that can be a bit difficult. Likewise, when there are large groups out at lunch, we'll have some protocols in place for that in terms of where they sit, but if they could also please remember to make sure that they look after themselves and take responsibility as well in terms of social distancing. So families, parents and young men, we are really looking forward, and I certainly am, to seeing you back next week. And certainly forging forward for this term and the next term, things will be different, but they can also be exciting, and things that are done differently can also bring a certain amount of added motivation with them as well. So we certainly look forward to seeing you next week, and parents, I hope at some stage we'll be able to see one another in different circumstances and in larger gatherings down the track. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your last weekend before we start back.